Paul Ricca, also known as Felice de Lucia, was a notorious figure in the world of organized crime during the mid-20th century. Born in Italy in 1897, Ricca immigrated to the United States as a young man and quickly became involved in the Chicago Mafia, rising through the ranks to become a top boss in the organization. With a reputation for being a shrewd and calculating leader, Ricca was known to have extensive connections with politicians, law enforcement, and even the CIA. Despite being indicted numerous times for a variety of crimes, including extortion and murder, Ricca managed to avoid conviction through a combination of clever legal maneuvering and intimidation tactics. His legacy continues to haunt the criminal underworld to this day, as his influence and reach are felt far beyond his death in 1972. Ricca was born Felice de Lucia on November 14, 1897, in Naples, Campania, and by the time he was 17, he was working for organized crime in the city. On mafia orders, he murdered Emilio Perillo in 1915, but later claimed that he killed Perillo for breaking an engagement to his sister. After serving 2 years in prison for this murder conviction in 1917, Ricca slit the throat of Vincenzo Capasso, a witness in the Perillo trial who had testified against him. After killing Capasso, Ricca fled to the United States via Cuba under the guise of Paul Maglio. Ricca had met Chicago bootlegger and restaurant owner Joseph Diamond Joe Esposito while he was in Cuba. Esposito later brought Ricca to Chicago. While there, he worked at Esposito's Bella Napoli restaurant in Chicago, first as a theater usher and then as a waiter. Along with earning him the moniker The Waiter, the job also gave him an explanation when the police questioned him about his line of work. Many Chicago gangsters frequented the Bella Napoli, where Ricca worked, including Al Capone, the leader of the South Side Gang. Ricca quickly quit working at the restaurant and joined the South Side Gang because the two of them had a number of mutual friends among Neapolitan gangsters who had returned to Italy. Ricca became a power in the Capone days, known to Al as a man who could figure the angles in any sort of racket. Allegedly, while Capone was eating in the restaurant, Ricca saved his life during a drive-by shooting. He warned Capone to get down, saving him from being shot, but Ricca himself would sustain a gunshot wound to the left shoulder. Capone stood up as best man for him at his wedding, when he married Nancy Emily Gigante, who was also from Naples, in 1927. Capone and Ricca attended the Atlantic City Conference, the first gathering of all the major crime families in the United States, which took place in Atlantic City, New Jersey, in 1929. To act as his representative in negotiations to put an end to the Castellamarese War between the New York Italian-American gangs in 1930, Capone dispatched Ricca to New York City. Ricca's reputation and notoriety grew after the National Crime Syndicate was founded in 1931. Capone was found guilty of tax evasion in 1931 and given an 11-year prison term. Frank the Enforcer Nitti, with Ricca as front boss, was Capone's nominal successor. However, it is well known that Paul the Waiter Ricca was dealt with by organized crime figures like Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. Nitti was completely ignored, he wasn't even aware of what was happening. Ricca continued to gain prominence throughout the 1930s, and by 1939 he had a firm grip on the organization. Power within the Chicago syndicate gravitated toward the person strong and cunning enough to seize it. The only people who could even be compared to him in cunning and strength were Tony Joe Batters Accardo and Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik, but each in their respective traits. According to the book The Mafia Encyclopedia, whenever Paul the Waiter Ricca said, "Make him go away," DeStefano saw to it that the man went away, permanently. Mad Sam DeStefano was one of the Chicago outfit's most notorious loan sharks and sociopathic killers. Ricca and the other members of the outfit leadership were persuaded by Nitti to take part in a labor racket and extortion plot directed at the Los Angeles film studios. The Projectors Union was taken over by Chicago mobster John "Handsome Johnny" Rosselli, who then threatened the studios with strikes and other labor issues. Ricca and Nitti, however, were caught up in the massive shakedown of the motion picture industry in the early 1940s, along with much of the mob leadership. Nitti and Ricca met on March 18, 1943, with the outfit leadership. Ricca decided the time was right to call in Nitti's cards as a front man given the movie indictments. He gave Nitti the order to plead guilty and take the fall at a meeting of the mob's top leaders. Nitti, who had served 18 months for an income tax charge at the beginning of the 1930s, was terrified by the idea. Nitti was seen walking along railroad tracks the next day, March 19, 1943. He then pulled a gun from his pocket and shot himself. Along with other mobsters, Ricca received a 10-year sentence in 1943, but was apparently freed in August 1947 thanks to Attorney General Tom Clark's intervention. The case's early paroles infuriated the Chicago press, which reported Ricca's assertions that his influence reached the White House. According to the book, The Mafia Encyclopedia, Ricca instructed his lawyers to find out who had the final say in his speedy release, saying, "That man must want something, money, favors, a seat in the Supreme Court, find out what he wants and get it for him." Tony Accardo visited Ricca in his cell while he was incarcerated and informed Ricca of syndicate activities while posing as his lawyer. Within a few years, Ricca allowed Sam Giancana to command the syndicate while he and Accardo hid in the shadows, safe from government scrutiny. Giancana's reputation in organized crime during his adolescence caught the attention of Chicago outfit leaders. He joined the Chicago outfit in the late 1930s and was in charge of Louisiana's illegal gambling, illicit liquor trade, and political rackets from the 1940s through the 1950s. Giancana participated in Chicago's African-American lottery payout system for the outfit in the early 1940s. Ricca was referred to as the national head of the crime syndicate in the Kefauver Committee hearings on organized crime in the early 1950s. He was referred to as the most important criminal in America by the McClellan Committee in 1958. Each time Ricca testified in front of a committee, he frequently invoked the Fifth Amendment. Ricca lost his citizenship in 1957, and 2 years later a deportation order was issued. Ricca used a variety of appeals and delays to postpone his deportation to Italy, even obtaining a court stay by petitioning an Italian court to have his Italian citizenship revoked. The Italian government made a remarkable decision by refusing to return Ricca, even to complete his previous murder sentence. Ricca was then informed by impatient immigration officials that he would need to locate a country to which he could be deported. Ricca quickly followed directions and submitted applications, which included a packet of news clippings explaining the reasons the U.S. government thought he was so undesirable with each application. Somehow, no country showed any desire to let him in. He spent a lot of time in his later years listening to Italian tourists speaking their native tongue at the Alitalia terminal at O'Hare Airport. It's believed that Ricca had become a little senile as a result of spending so much time at the airport. Federal agents, however, believed he was setting up meetings with drug or contraband smugglers. On October 11, 1972, Ricca passed away from a heart attack at St. Luke's Hospital in Chicago, though some accounts claim he passed away in his bed. While Paul Ricca was alive, nothing would happen to DeStefano and he was safe, but a few months after Ricca's death, Mad Sam DeStefano was murdered.